What's going on, guys? This is Luke from Sober from Despair, and I want to welcome you to the third video in the Successful Recovery series. The topic of this video is determination. I want to start off by saying recovery is going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life if you do it right. This is going to be extremely hard in the beginning. It's going to be somewhat hard a little ways through, and then it's going to get easier as time goes on. But it's always going to be a pretty discomforting process. The reason I had the first two videos be on positivity and on finding a direction with where you want to go in your life is because with having those two in place, you're going to be determined to go through the struggles that are going to be presented to you as time goes on your journey. The reason why recovery is so hard in the beginning, to me, is there's a ton of things you got to change about yourself. For an example, with me, like when I first got into it, there's a lot of uncomfortable things that I had to do. I had to face my social phobias. I had to face the walls that I had placed around myself. I had to face life sober, and it wasn't comfortable. I'd grown very disconnected. I'd grown to a place where instead of facing different feelings and facing problems that I was having, I would use to get away from the discomfort of them. And I would try to go about my day as best I could. And to me, a good day was if I made it through and if I got high that day. That was it. It wasn't a good day if I was progressing. I didn't care about progressing. And once recovery came along, once I got into this and started trying to get clean, all that had to change for me because it was a totally different way of living my life. It was actually living my life. And so in the beginning, there was a ton of things that I had to change about myself. I mean, even down to the small things like being in rehab and having to get up and have a schedule to my day instead of sleeping in all the time. And I would fight that as much as I could. There's times that I faked being sick, and I would say that I had a headache or something, or that I couldn't sleep the night before just so that I could get a few hours more sleep in the morning and skip breakfast. I would be in withdrawals, and I would try to leave meetings that we were at on the campus of the rehab center that I was at. I was trying to leave because, one, I wasn't feeling well, but two, I didn't want to go through what they were asking me to do. I didn't want to take a look in the mirror. I wasn't concerned with the other people's stories and the other people that were in the program with me. And so those were things that I had to eventually start changing about myself, those small things. And as time went on, once I got out of rehab, that's when it was extremely hard. The whole time I was in rehab, I was just wanting to be free. I was wanting to get out of these constrictions, as wanting to be able to drive and do what I wanted with my day and everything. And once that freedom was granted to me, that's when life got really hard because it was me. It wasn't me being stuck at a place where I couldn't leave and I didn't have the resources available to me to leave, like a car or anything. I had to be there. And once I got out, I had all these freedoms granted to me. And then came all the cravings, and then came all the crazy obsessions and ideas with wanting to use. And that was really scary. Luckily, I left from rehab and went to intensive outpatient treatment. But even still, I had to stay at my grandma's house for the first couple months because I couldn't be home. Because at home there was a ton of triggers, a ton of things that I could have relapsed on. I mean, hell, there was all the medication that I had been stealing from my dad over the past few years to get high off of. And so I had to go to a place where I was able to grow enough to be comfortable back in that environment. And the thing to me that seems to be the number one reason why recovery is so hard is the way my brain works. And I'm sure the way your brain works too. Have you ever noticed, like, while you're driving and you see a deer on the side of the road, and just the noise of your car or your headlights or something can make that deer kind of jump up, and its heart will start beating, and it'll fall into that fight or flight mode. Sometimes even if they're in the road, they'll just stand there staring at the lights, or they'll be on the side of the road and they jump into the fight or the flight mode, and they'll run out in front of your car. Well, that's their adrenal system kicking in, and they're in survival mode. Well, with being a person, being a human being, and living in normal Western society, I'm not really in fight or flight mode that much. Yeah, sure, there's times where I'm driving, and something jumps out in front of me, or there comes a situation where I need to react quickly, and that'll force me into fight or flight mode. But for the most part, I'm not too worried about food, not too worried about shelter, not too worried about all the normal things that every other animal has had to face on a day-to-day basis in order to survive. Most of those survival necessities are already presented to me on an everyday basis through my job and through support of my family. So having that survival mode still so ingrained within my brain and my body as being a species, an animal, my brain is shifted from being focused on surviving to focused on surviving my concepts, making sure that my identity, or what I associate as my identity, those concepts aren't attacked. And so getting into recovery, most of the way that I lived my life previously, pretty much my whole life, I think I was a drug addict long before I used drugs. I had a total predisposition to it. I had the gene, obviously, but then outside of that, I had all these anxieties, all these fucked up irrational thinkings, all these crazy thoughts going in my head all the time. And I started living my life to protect myself from having to go through things that would, things and situations that would try to test my own thinking, things that would present to me counter viewpoints. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say when I first got into recovery, I was very defensive about what I was and was not willing to do. If it meant having to go to a meeting, I didn't want to go to a meeting, and a lot of times I would lie about it. I would even forge signatures on my meeting sheets just so that I didn't have to go to the meeting, because my concept, it was, I'm not fit for society. I'm very sociophobic. I think that other people are looking down on me. I'm very insecure. And when I was going to a meeting in a group full of strangers, that really put pressure on those feelings I already had about myself. That really made me have to step outside my comfort zone. And so I do whatever I could to make sure that that identity that I had inside myself was protected, because it was really hard for me to face the opposite viewpoint and just go through the pain temporarily to come out on the other side and see that everything was okay, and it's actually me that's pretty fucked up. And so getting into recovery, there was a ton of different ideologies that I had in my head that made me think this was an impossible process. If it meant having to drive down to take a UA, I would fight it every step of the way in the beginning. If it meant me having to take naltrexone, I would fight that every step in the way in the beginning. And when the way it was presented to me was, well, you could either be on the naltrexone, come down, take a UA, go to meetings, or you're kicked out of the program. That's when it got real, because I was like, well, this program is going to save my life, because this is the second time that I've had to do one of these, and the first time I dropped out, and I saw how that played out for me, and it wasn't very good. So with that being confronted and that being challenged, I decided to go along with what they were telling me to do. And as much as I fought it in the beginning, eventually once I gave in a little bit, once I became determined that, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, this is right for me, and as hard as it is, as much as I'm going to fight it, if I give in, things will get better. And things did get better. And so that's what makes this process so hard, is learning to be determined that, you know what, I've been fucked up most of my life, and I'm going to try to look at this from a different angle, and I'm going to do things differently than I would have done previously. So when my family would, and even still to this day, when people like challenge my sobriety or my recovery, there's times that I get defensive. My heart starts pumping and start getting like irritated and agitated. But I got to learn to let that go. Got to learn to be free of these old thinkings and be free of living in this narcissistic world where I'm right and everybody else is wrong. And if they are challenging what I'm going through, I got to try to learn to see it from their angle, because my angle has been messed up, and maybe I have been acting weird at times when people challenge me. Maybe I had been caught in lies. Maybe I wasn't very passionate about life. Maybe I wasn't acting myself. Maybe I was being depressed, and these were all the old warning signs that my family saw and people saw in me when I was using. So maybe I'm already on the verge of a relapse without even knowing it, and when other people present that to me, I'll get kind of defensive, but I gotta learn to let that go, because they're here to challenge my beliefs, and sometimes my beliefs are messed up. Sometimes the way I'm living, my behaviors are messed up. And so with letting that go, as painful as it is, and every time it's going to be pretty painful, when you let it go, you come out of the other side and you see, you know what? I fucked up. Fucked up again. I had some delusional, irrational thinking, and I was behaving really weird. Thank you. And thank people in your heart, inside. Thank them for challenging the way you are, because it's going to make you better. So this is going to be a hard fucking process. It's not easy. If it was easy, there would be a ton of people that are in recovery and not addicted to drugs anymore. There would be a ton of people that you'll see in meetings, at your AA, in your therapy offices, in your rehabs, that don't drop out. Those probably wouldn't even exist, because it would be easy and it would just come naturally, and people wouldn't even have to go to these places. But that's not the way it is. The way it is we all have fucked up thinking. We all are predisposed to being addicts and alcoholics just in our thinking and behaviors alone, outside of the biological factors that come into play, all the disease and stuff of addiction. Outside of that, all of our behaviors are already predisposing us for addiction, so we got to learn to change those, and that's why we go to these places. That's why we need spiritual connection. That's why we need to be connected with others, and that's why we need to help others and learn to have a place of unity, whether it be in AA or whether it be just a friend group, your family, whatever it is, a place of being unified with other people and connected to other people. Because if we're only connected to ourselves and our own way of thinking, we're going to fuck up. We're going to be messed up again. So that's what this video is about, is getting into this. It's going to be hard. It's going to be trying. But every time you challenge yourself and you accept when somebody else challenges you and you learn to let go and just experience what's going on, it's going to get easy and it's going to feel good, and you're not going to be imprisoned by yourself anymore. That's what they mean when they say imprisonment. I felt imprisoned by what I was going through, or the drugs were building a little cage around me. It's because our behaviors and our actions are imprisoning us from being free. And every time somebody challenges that and we get defensive, we're being imprisoned by ourselves again. We need to learn to let that go and just be ourselves, be who we are at the core of our being, outside of our irrational, delusional thinking. We need to just look at our thinking as we experience it and be like, that thought was weird. Instead of playing into the thought and giving it a bunch of energy and blowing it up into this huge thing, we could just look at it and be like, wow, that was a weird thought. That was pretty irrational. I have no idea why I thought that, but what's going on right now? I'll talk about that more in future videos as we get further along this process. So I want to thank you for coming on the website. Thank you for watching this, and we'll talk to you soon.